Welcome to the Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities web module series. This series of web modules was developed by the SELPA System Improvement Leads. The purpose of the SELPA System Improvement Lead project is to work collaboratively within the statewide system of support to build the capacity of special education local plan areas, SELPAs, and local education agencies, LEAs, with a common goal to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. In Module 2 of the Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities web module series, we will discuss support for students with disabilities. The Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities Handbook was created in partnership by El Dorado County Office of Education and Sacramento County Office of Education for publication by the California County Superintendent's Educational Services Association, also known as SESESA. The handbook provides resources and guidance for leadership teams supporting school staff to understand the California School Dashboard and use the data presented on the dashboard to make adjustments to programs and services for students with disabilities within an improvement process. The Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities Handbook is divided into 4 sections. Section 1, California's Accountability System. Section 2, Support for Students with Disabilities. Section 3, Improvement. And Section 4, Toolkit. A downloadable copy of the handbook is attached to this module for reference. The guidance in the Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities Handbook was based on 6 guiding principles taken from known effective program elements necessary for students with disabilities and a recent 2015 statewide task force report on special education named One System, Reforming Education to Serve All Students. The task force report can be found on the San Mateo County Office of Education website at www.smcoe.org. The 6 guiding principles are: number 1, general education and special education work together seamlessly as one coherent system. Number 2, educational programs are organized within the context of a multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS framework, to ensure academic and behavioral supports are provided for all students. Number 3, instructional programs incorporate high-quality, standards-aligned, evidence-based practices and the use of principles of universal design for learning, UDL. Number 4, data systems are integrated to combine relevant information from state and local assessments, including formative and summative data, universal screening measures, and anecdotal observations from parents and teachers. Number 5, site-based teams monitor progress, identify interventions, and adapt instructional practices and behavioral supports to promote success for all students using evidence-based systems of inquiry. And number 6, programs are culturally and linguistically responsive. The ideas from these principles form the foundation of the handbook, which will be further explored through this web module series. 4 separate web modules have been created to assist schools in gaining a deeper understanding of the contents within the Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities Handbook. The 4 web modules are: Module 1, California's Accountability System. Module 2, Support for Students with Disabilities. Module 3, Improvement Process Part 1, Prepare. And Module 4, Improvement Process Part 2, Launch, Reflect, and Adjust. Let's take a closer look at Web Module 2, Support for Students with Disabilities. This web module follows Module 1, which reviewed how California's accountability system provides a reporting system intended to promote equity for all students and highlight disparities among student groups. Module 2 dives deeper into models and process intended to help schools plan and implement instructional programs that improve academic performance and address identified gaps in learning for all students. More specifically, this module will review the following topics: background information about students with disabilities in California, a closer look at the emphasis on creating one system for all students, and aligning support for students with disabilities through an overview of multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS, Universal Design for Learning, UDL, and Evidence-Based Practices, EBPs. California's Special Education Task Force report, One System, Reforming Education to Serve All Students, March 2015, underscores the significance of the establishment of one coherent system of education. In a coherent system of education, all children are considered general education students first. All educators, regardless of which students they are assigned to serve, have a collective responsibility to see that all children receive the education and the supports they need to maximize their development and potential so that they can participate meaningfully in the nation's economy and democracy. Ideally, educators begin to foster an inclusive mindset from the beginning of children's schooling experiences. Schools and individualized education program or IEP teams also work together to create a system in which all children, including students with disabilities, are provided with access and equal opportunities in the least restrictive environment, LRE. This is especially important as children transition to some of their first schooling experiences as preschoolers. In order to ensure that all children receive the education and supports they need to maximize their development and potential, all educators must discern the differences between equality and equity and recognize that different students may need different types of supports. Providing the same supports to all students does not meet the needs of individual students. It is essential to acknowledge that different students may need different types of supports to fully access their educational program. Students enrolled in special education programs represent approximately 11% of California's kindergarten through 12th grade student population. Special education services provide individualized programs designed to meet students' unique needs within a variety of settings. Students who qualify for special education are designated through a primary disability category in IDEA. The table on this slide displays information released by the California Department of Education, CDE, showing the 2017 special education case miss data that notes the number and percentage of students with disabilities in each category. Each category of disability encompasses a wide range of student need, and as a result, students may require mild to significant supports. Section 2 of the handbook begins by addressing background information about California's students with disabilities and shows how they are included in the unduplicated student groups in the Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP. Let's take a closer look. The Local Control Funding Formula, LCFF, is hallmark legislation that fundamentally changed how all local education agencies in the state are funded, how they are measured for results, and the services and supports they receive to allow all students to succeed to their greatest potential. Enacted in 2013, LEAs receive additional funding based on the LCFF to support students identified as English learners, students that meet income or categorical eligibility requirements for free or reduced price meals under the National School Lunch Program, and students who are foster youth. These student groups are also termed unduplicated. The Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP, describes actions and services provided to all students with a focus on improving the outcomes of unduplicated students. Schools are required to develop an LCAP. The LCAP describes how schools intend to meet annual goals for all pupils with specific activities to address state and local priorities. In 2016-17, a majority of students with disabilities were also represented in at least one unduplicated student group that is part of the LCAP. Let's review the representation of students with disabilities within an unduplicated student count. 13% of low-income students have an individualized education plan, IEP. 17% of English learners have IEPs. And 27% of foster youth also have IEPs. The California Department of Education's definition of a multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS, provides a basis for understanding how California educators can work together to ensure equitable access and opportunity for all students to achieve the Common Core state standards. This extends to how educators support students with disabilities. MTSS includes response to instruction and intervention RTI squared, as well as additional distinct philosophies and concepts. Whether addressing academics, behavior, or social emotional learning, it is important to consider what is being done to support high quality first instruction, what systematic processes are in place to identify need, and layer additional support for some students who need targeted supports in these areas. Additionally, what is in place to identify needs and layer further supports for those students that benefit from intensive individualized academic, behavioral, or social emotional supports. The green tier at the bottom of the pyramid shows that all students need the general program and school-wide supports that are available. Some students benefit from targeted additional supports, as is shown by the yellow tier in the middle of the pyramid. About 5 through 15% of the students may need these supports at any given time. A few students will need intensive, individualized supports, about 1 through 7% of the students. This is shown in the red section at the top of the pyramid. Taken together, these layers are known as the multi-tiered system of supports. Let's review some key elements of a high-quality multi-tiered system of supports found within the handbook. System-wide alignment of resources and initiatives and systematic processes for identifying resources and who may benefit from universal, targeted, and intensive supports. District, site, and grade level participation in alignment of resources and programs. Support for all students, including gifted and high achievers. Use of Universal Design for Learning, UDL, proactive lesson planning framework, which will be discussed in greater detail later in this presentation, and a focus on sustainable interventions that reflect best practice aligned to Common Core state standards. A critical element of MTSS is the use of Universal Design for Learning, or UDL principles, for curriculum development and instruction to provide students with equitable access to education. UDL principles optimize instruction and supports for all students in the general education setting and ensure full access to the general curriculum regardless of disability, English language proficiency, income level, race, or academic performance. UDL is an evidence-based practice that takes into account the multitude of needs of all learners in the classroom and proactively assists educators in addressing the why, what, and how of learning in their classrooms. UDL is a set of principles for curriculum development that give all individuals equal opportunities to learn. UDL provides a blueprint for creating instructional goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone. Not a single one-size-fits-all solution, but rather flexible approaches that can be customized and adjusted for individual needs. UDL is necessary because each student brings a variety of skills, needs, and interests to learning. Neuroscience reveals that these differences are as varied and unique as our DNA or fingerprints. The 3 primary brain networks are shown on this slide. The arrows below the images of the networks remind us of the considerations educators must address when planning effective lessons. UDL allows students to maximize their development and potential no matter their learning or other individual needs. The use of UDL principles for curriculum development and instruction provides students with equitable access to education. UDL principles are intended to optimize instruction and supports for all students in the general education setting and ensure full access to the general curriculum regardless of disability, English language proficiency, income level, race, or academic performance. UDL provides teachers with a data-driven, research-based blueprint for meeting the full range of student needs. These principles also include differentiated instruction that matches individual student needs with appropriate instructional strategies in classroom settings. UDL offers students explicit and rigorous instruction that is both culturally responsive and linguistically appropriate. Instruction and interventions that build upon a student's cultural knowledge, home language, background, and experiences as well as their linguistic proficiency in both English and their native language, are essential to UDL. Approaching instruction with these considerations helps teachers to determine how a student learns best, identify preferred settings and optimal teaching conditions, and ensure all students have access to and are learning from rigorous, engaging general education curriculum. Evidence-based practices, or EBPs, are an important component of MTSS. The concept of evidence-based practice began in the medical field in the 1970s and was adopted by the field of education with the federal No Child Left Behind Act, where the term scientifically based research was repeatedly mentioned. The benefits of implementing EBPs include an increased likelihood of positive outcomes, less time and resources devoted to ineffective programs, and an increase in sustainability because data supports the efficacy of these practices. Evidence-based practices or programs have research to show that they are effective at producing results and improving outcomes when implemented. The kind of evidence described in the Every Student Succeeds Act has generally been produced through formal studies and research. Regulatory guidance using evidence to strengthen education through the U.S. Department of Education cites 4 tiers of evidence as follows. Tier 1, strong evidence, supported by one or more well-designed and well-implemented randomized control experimental studies. Tier 2, moderate evidence, supported by one or more well-designed and well-implemented quasi-experimental studies. Tier 3, promising evidence, supported by one or more well-designed and well-implemented correlational studies with statistical controls for selection bias. And Tier 4, demonstrates a rationale, practices that have a well-defined logic model or theory of action are supported by research and have some effort underway by a state, district, or outside research organization to determine their effectiveness. Understanding the 4 tiers of rigorous evidence can increase the impact of educational investments by ensuring that interventions being implemented have proven to be effective in leading to desired outcomes, namely improving student achievement. Section 4 of the handbook has several tools that schools can consider in evaluating the implementation of EBPs. One such tool is the EBP comparison sheet. This tool is a matrix to compare programs and practices using a variety of factors, including target student population, resources required for implementation, and time required. The hexagon tool provides teams a structure for discussions around 6 components: capacity, fit, need, evidence, usability, and support. We encourage you to pause this module and download each of these tools for your review and use in planning and implementing evidence-based practices. In this module, we reviewed background information about students with disabilities in California. We took a closer look at the emphasis on creating one system for all students, and we discussed aligning supports for students with disabilities through an overview of multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS, Universal Design for Learning, UDL, and evidence-based practices, EBPs. The next module in our series, Module 3, supports school teams in preparing for an improvement process. Thank you for viewing Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities, Module 2. As mentioned in the beginning of this module, a downloadable copy of the handbook and any resources are attached for reference. We hope you'll join us for our 3 other Improving Performance of Students with Disabilities modules.